next speaker is going to provide you with some very exciting, compelling information. Art Campbell has been, two speakers as a matter of fact. Art Campbell has been interested in UFO research since the 1950s. He was an early NICAP investigator, that's an investigation committee for aerial phenomenon, and chairman of NICAP chapter in Kansas City, Missouri. In the 50s, he worked with the founder of that organization, Donald Kehoe, and I believe, thank you. We made contact with former President Truman in the spring of 1958 at the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. And Kehoe's subsequent letter to President Truman begins Mr. Campbell's book called UFO Crash at San Augustine. Did a UFO crash on the plains of San Augustine in 1947?
Presenting along with Art is Bill Kirkland. He was an Air Force medic and high-altitude chamber specialist stationed in Holloman Air Force Base in 1955. Kirkland learned of several eyewitness reports of President Eisenhower at Holloman on or about February 11th, 1955, in Ike's third year of his first term. What transpired at that time has drawn Bill and Art into an extraordinary journey of research and discovery. Whatever success the exopolitical activism of the disclosure movement does have, it will not have been possible without decades of work by hundreds of researchers like the two presenters you're going to see today. So please welcome to X Conference 2009, Art Campbell and Bill Kirkland.
It's really a privilege to be here. We've heard a lot about the X Conference west of the Mississippi, but not too many of us could get here. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Kirkland, his background. He's a graduate of Montebello High School in California, and he was, as Stephen mentioned, a high-altitude chamber specialist, and he was trained at Gunther Air Force Base in Alabama in the early 50s. He attended Long Beach State College and had a major in applied math and physics. He worked for North American Aviation in Burbank, California, Collins Radio at Newport Beach, Montebello Lockheed Missile and Montebello, California, Lockheed Missile and Space in Houston, Texas for NASA, and he worked on the Apollo 14 simulator in Houston. He's a retired executive from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Has 25 years in computer and 4 years in the military service. He served your government and mine for 29 years. It's my great privilege to present to you Mr. Bill Kirkland.
I don't know whether you're aware of this, but you're going to hear hearsay information that'll never get any of these people who withhold the truth in criminal or in criminal courts, So we'll talk about this. Before I start, I would like to thank Steve and Cheryl for setting this up, and I feel like I'm honored to be with you talking about this. In 1955, when I was at Holloman, and Eisenhower landed there, I didn't believe this for 40 years. I didn't believe any of this until 1995. Okay? And you're going to hear the story. I was stationed at George Air Force Base at Victorville, California. And while I was there, Eisenhower landed at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino. A friend of mine who went to the same school that I was Ben Luth, and Ben went with the ambulance down to Norton to protect the Eisenhower train in case something went in, a plane in case some accident took place. When he got back, I asked him, Ben, what happened? And he said, Eisenhower landed, met some of the officials, he said, went aboard a C-45. I didn't know what a C-45 was. I had to find out. He says, and then headed off towards Palmdale or towards Edward or Muroc, depending on how you wanted to look at it. That's the wrong way from Palm Springs. It's to the northwest, and Palm Springs is to the east of Norton. When I was at George Air Force Base, Edwards was only cut down twice. Once when a test pilot by the name of Connors was killed, and the other time was about this time when Eisenhower was there. I didn't know why it was cut down, I thought, and wondered what test pilot lost his life. The information that I just gave you on George has been verified by Dr. Michael Sala, and you can check with him about that. When I went to Holloman Air Force Base, because George Air Force Base didn't have a high-altitude chamber, so I went to Holloman and worked at the Aeromed laboratory under Colonel John Paul Stapp, the guy who drove the rocket sled. There were 4 flight surgeons at Holloman. John Paul Stapp was one, David Simons was another, and there was a hospital commander, a lieutenant colonel, I can't remember his name, and Dr. Robert Reiner, who was a captain. I went to Reiner's office from the Aeromed laboratories because I did not keep chicken eggs alive. I didn't put any water in an incubator, and they died. Now, David Simons wrote a kind of bad letter for me so that I'd get out of there. And he did the right thing because I'm not a lab person. I'm a person. Okay? When I went to work for Dr. Reiner, I worked in the flight surgeon's office there. Dr. Reiner was the best man that I have ever worked for in my life. Marvelous man. While I was there, Eisenhower was going to land one day, and in the winter, February, Holloman Air Force Base has got a code that unless in the wintertime everything is normally khakis. Unless you're doing base operations work and are an officer of an official standing on the base, then you wear blues. That's in the wintertime. So the story that I'm telling you, the difference between khakis and blues is very important. When Eisenhower was supposed to land, or come in, the day before he was to come in, a parade to honor him was canceled. The President of the United States is entitled to full military honors at any base that he lands on. And that means a parade. Dr. Reiner asked me if I wanted to go to the parade, and I said no. He said, okay, you're working. Well, the work schedule of Eisenhower didn't show up. The parade didn't show up. So I just went to work like normal. And when I went there, there was a nurse who worked there that said, Kirkland, where's Dorsey? Dorsey Moore was the airman in charge of our little group. He wasn't an officer, he was an airman. And I said, I don't. And just then Dorothea Thorenson, who was our clerk typist, said, I saw him take his wife down to the commissary. He'll be back in about 15 or 20 minutes. I just kept quiet after that, you know. When Dorsey came in about 15 minutes later, he said, Kirkland, did you see what's out on the flight line? I said, what is it? He says, it's a disc, hovering disc. I'm thinking disc that you can throw, 12 inches maybe, wood